Brian Kialabocha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, there was a lot going on campus yesterday. Of course, you both represent the Rhodes Must Fall movement, and you promised me last time, Brian, that the removal of the Rhodes statue on campus wasn't going to be the end of the lobbying for your group. So talk to us a little bit about what happened yesterday. Brian, kick us off.
Okay, so yesterday, Rhodes Must Fall issued a press statement. So we started a campaign in solidarity of Marikana on Saturday evening, launching a video that we encourage everybody to check out on our Facebook page. And essentially what we've been doing is having a lot of educational talks, looking at the events of Marikana, the massacre of Marikana from different aspects, starting with the conversation, I think, on gendered perspectives of Marikana, leading up to our press statement where we issued a statement discussing UCT-specific complicity in the Marikana massacre, to the extent to which we see the university as being integral in the colonial project, which we believe produces expressions of violence like the Marikana massacre, which we expect to continue unless the project which we discuss in our manifesto, the decolonization project, is fulfilled at the University of Cape Town and in South African society at large.
Brian, I want you to explain what you mean by Cape Town being a part of the colonial structure. It's obviously a sweeping statement, or rather a very big statement to say that UCT has been directly involved in Marikana. Tell us what you mean.
Okay, so I think it's important to note from the Rhodes Must Fall side, there's a particular reason why this makes a lot of sense for us to do. We have Rhodes in our very manifesto, and our approach is looking at the symbolism behind what Cecil John Rhodes meant, not only for this country, but for the continent, but for the legacy that it has continued to lay on the present day. And if we look at the likes of Cecil John Rhodes and their impact on UCT specifically, we see that the university was created specifically to be an ivory tower. It was created specifically to create knowledge production that would help in the pursuit of improving or garnering white monopoly capital. And I think that mines like Lonmin, which was a previous division of the company London Rhodes, are very much an unbroken connection to the project that was started a long time ago, which was to connect Cape to Cairo, not in any positive affirmative sense, but in an exploitative chain that would leave us destitute even more so than what we are today.
Kialabocha, it actually also goes, the connections, even further than that, and that is the call by the Rhodes Must Fall movement about steps that need to be taken against Ian Farlam. Explain that to us, please.
So I think as the movement, because as it's public knowledge that Ian Farlam was the head of the Marikana Commission.
This is Judge Farlam,
yes. Judge Ian Farlam was the head of the Marikana Commission. And he is also a part of the University Council, the University of Cape Town Council, which is the highest decision-making structure at the university. And I think for us, it was more of a, we needed to know what the linkages were between Lonmin, because it's not just through the retirement fund. Around the campus, you'll see signages of Lonmin. We know that Lonmin has funded buildings at the university. It's funded events at the university, and it was alarming to seeing that there's a connection that Judge Ian Farlam sits at on the council of a university that has so many ties with Lonmin, and what are those ties? And so we're still investigating some of these connections, and we want to uncover exactly what these the connections are, and if actually there was a biased decision made on the commission, and if there's any connection that can be made between his involvement in UCT and the outcomes of the reports.
Let's clear this up for our viewers then. Is the Rhodes Must Fall movement expressing dissatisfaction at the findings of the Marikana inquiry headed up by Judge Farlam, or is the problem here his connections to Lonmin through the university? Is it both? Let's talk a little bit about that.
I think, like, for Rhodes Must Fall, the number one would have to be the conflict of interest. The fact that he sits on the council of the University of Cape Town. The University of Cape Town has so many linkages with Lonmin, and he has to make decisions, has to conclude on a commission that has to make decisions around the Marikana massacre. There's no denying that 34 people died 3 years ago, and people need to be held responsible. And we want to actually state that there needed to be a level of independence in what happened. And if there wasn't that level of independence, we need to investigate, and we need to know why it wasn't there, and if this connection can be made in some way. And that's a part of what we're trying to find out as a movement.
But I think on the issue of the findings, most definitely we find them problematic, and we encourage people to look at our press statement where we specifically problematized how Ian Farlam locates the violence of Marikana and the roots of it. He locates them in disputes emanating from miners demanding fair wages. And from the Rhodes Must Fall movement side, we're saying, well, that's a poor articulation of the problem, because the root is actually the violent manifestation of exploitative enterprises, the mining industry themselves, is at the root of this crisis. And the continued violence that has waged against black bodies, that is the root of this crisis. And I think that when you look at that as a starting point, you view the crisis of the massacre of Marikana in a very different light. And we sort of take this stance because we want to try and hold accountable somebody who is not holding our government accountable and who is not holding private interests accountable. So if he won't do it, we will.
And I think we also are challenging the limited understanding of what violence is and what type of violence needs to be recognized in these instances. Like Brian said, a level of violence has been perpetuated against these mine workers from Lonmin and white monopoly capital in South Africa, and that needs to be recognized as well. Mine companies need to be held accountable for the violence that they inflict on a daily basis.
Speak to us about that. So when we're talking about South Africans understanding a broader definition of violence, at the moment I think many viewers, South Africans, people who want to interact with this conversation would say violence is a physical assault of one person on another. You're saying actually we need to look past that.
And I'm actually thinking to something that Mutunja said just the day of the massacre, actually, when he was begging the miners to leave, and he said, we need to recognize that the life of a black person is worthless in this country, and that's the type of the devaluing of black bodies within the mining industry especially, and this cycle of cheap labor and this cycle of devaluing black bodies, slaying a group of black bodies and just substituting them with another group of black bodies, and the same, and citizens having to deal with the same cycle of things. And who's to say that a few years from now, the women, the wives, and the family members of these slain mine workers who've now replaced them at Lonmin, who's to say that they won't be going through the same thing because of this cycle of violence that we're not understanding? That the fact that no one is being held accountable from Lonmin's side for the massacre is also part of the violence. It's violent because it prioritizes certain types of bodies, it prioritizes certain types of narratives over the other, and to actually hold the mine workers themselves accountable for the killing of their fellow mine workers, that's violent. That is violent. And we need to be understanding violence in that way too. The fact that money and influence and power and race can get you out of certain things in this country, that is part of the cycle of violence that we're speaking about, and that we need to be recognizing. Violence doesn't only manifest itself in the physical form, but it has many other ways that it manifests itself, and we need to be nitpicking these events and saying, how does this perpetuate the cycle of violence that comes out of this and that is continuing.
And I think that to build on that, even the migrant labor system has caused complete havoc in Southern Africa. And I think when we look even at the historic nature of who participates in these projects, we find a lot of them listed on the London Stock Exchange. So we must problematize these things and take them seriously, and also look, how do these things, if these are major donors of the university, and if the only new buildings that are coming up for things like engineering, which we identify as something that is a scarce skill in this country that is severely needed, if the major investments are coming from the likes of De Beers and Lonmin, we really need to look at the historic nature of what has taken place in South Africa and start asking us some serious questions.